Hey guys, welcome to Little Black Book 91. We're giving you guys another one of these lives in the early hours of the morning if you're American, but if you're in England, happy lunch. Listen, today we're talking to you guys about the topic of why men can't be vulnerable. Why is it that men just can't share their vulnerabilities? Why can't they be vulnerable? And let me give a quick summary of that. I mean, the reality is that the world has told men what masculinity is, and a part of masculinity oftentimes in this instance is one that's toxic. Men are to man up, boys are not to cry, boys are not supposed to say that, don't look weak, that is weak. Boys don't do that, that's for the girls, right? And so we're socially conditioned in that particular way. But the reality is, most of us have been conditioned at home first. And that programming that we've been programmed by our home meets outside and confirms the bias that this is the correct way to behave. A lot of men who struggle to be vulnerable have struggled to be vulnerable and emotive and failed to be able to express themselves at home first before they reach outside. So I decided to do another video around this topic based upon my therapy session that I had on Monday, and I've diluted different topics from that particular session. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you like, you share, subscribe, because we're going to talk more about why men can't share their vulnerabilities and explore that area and hopefully bring more awareness to you to be able to improve on that in future. If you're new to the channel, like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of uploads. We appreciate y'all. Stay locked and stay loaded, okay? And don't forget, we also have a membership as well, which we will be doing more lives on a Tuesday night. It'll be every other Tuesday starting in February. So as soon as we're back in the UK, every other Tuesday will be membership live for an hour or so, where we do a video about it. Join our Patreon as well with a link down below for our Discord. And also you can join our Mineral Gang as well by joining the merchandise. Yes, go and grab your merchandise, okay? All right, join the team. All right, it's out here, baby. All right, cool. Listen, let's get into this. We're talking about why men can't share their vulnerabilities. Why is it that men can't share their vulnerabilities? Well, just like I have done for the past 2 days, I want to be able to start at the origin point. Okay, and if I can do that, then that will then help you have a bit more understanding of where I'm coming from, and also maybe help yourself learn where your own origin point of pain is as to why you won't be vulnerable. So the story that I've been telling from the very beginning is one where I was a very young man, a very young boy even, and I had some maths homework given by the teacher. And the teacher said, you should go home and give your homework to your parents if you don't fully understand it. Well, I obviously didn't fully understand it. I took it to my my parent carer. And in amongst that, the parent giver, my dad actually, whilst trying to teach me, beats me instead when I didn't get the answers right. And in amongst doing that, what he actually taught me was negative reinforcement, okay? So in that instance, the story is simply this, that he wanted to be able to teach me, okay? And what he taught me was that I can't rely on him to open himself up, because in reality, when I do open myself up, he decided to beat me, okay? Now, this is important because this is obviously where we start the origin of a story. Now, before anyone gets mad about it, when I say he was beating me, it's not necessarily like an abusive beating. It was more of a case of what we call old school teaching. You get your answers wrong, you get beaten. Come on, get it right, right? Concentrate. You're not focusing very well. So it's not just a beating of mad proportions or anything like that. I don't want your mind to think that, because I think this is how we're able to really understand how parenting actually really works. It wasn't like an over excessive beating. What his understanding was that when I brought the homework to him and I was giving out the answers, he felt like I wasn't being diligent enough with the way I was trying to answer the question. But I didn't really fully understand the mechanics and the workings behind it, because I'm also a person that needs to understand the why. When I don't understand the why, I struggle. And he didn't know that. right? And I didn't fully know that, so I couldn't express that to him. I didn't really fully understand it, and so I was getting beaten when I was getting the answer wrong. Now that story now elicits what I call feelings in that understanding. For me, it elicits feelings in that situation. Okay. Yes, I know from an outsider perspective, it sounds really, really bad, and I get it. I do. But it's old school. People used to do it in the Western world, in UK. People used to do it in Africa. It's not an African thing. I want to make it very, very clear. It's not an African thing. They did it in Europe. We did it in UK. It's a way of teaching people how to learn, right? And it worked for a time. When you're in survival mode, it works. It doesn't work when you're thriving, right? When you've gone to school to be educated and you're not taught that way, and the world isn't built that way. Yes, it can be seen as abusive, and I would understand what people are saying. I just saw it as, inappropriate force for what I was needing in that moment, right? But anyway, listen, next thing is to talk about the feelings that were elicited in that moment. So out of that issue, out of that result, out of that particular incident, what were my feelings in that moment? I think it's very important to identify as a man what your feelings were when there's a point of origin of pain. Here's the point of origin of pain, okay? The point of origin of pain is this. You have feelings of anger, rage, hurt, you're shunned, you're frustrated, you're aggrieved, you feel injustice in these moments. And these are some of the things I was feeling, right? I was feeling this anger, this rage, this hurt, this frustration, this aggrievement, this injustice. I felt it all in that moment when I was getting beaten for giving my homework over and being vulnerable in that moment, right? Now, I didn't know the answers, so that's why I did what the teacher told me. And you have to understand, when you're stuck, you ask for help. Okay, this is the why, okay? So as my parents, I asked my parents for help, and in doing so, I'm reaching out my hand to say, give me a little help. And in doing so, when I do that, I'm being vulnerable, right? So when I reach out my hand to ask for help, that is my moment of vulnerability. I'm admitting that I need your answers, or I need your strength, or I need your resources, or your tools. And so when I lift out my hand to help, if I then get beaten, I am now being taught that when I reach out my hand, it is a wrong thing to do. It is a wrong thing to do. Okay? All right? It is a wrong thing to do. Okay? So now I'm embarrassed also, and I'm ashamed, and I feel guilt for reaching out my hand to ask for help. Okay, all right. So now this is going to promote what I call a translation and then a behavior. So the result is from that. I apologize. There's a process I want to go through, right? So when we talk about the story, the origin, point of origin, you talk about your feelings. I talk about why it was a problem, and then I talk about the result. As a result, I wouldn't bring my homework to him, right? But here's the translation. I didn't ask him for help. I don't ask other people for help. I don't reach out for advice. I don't ask other people for advice. If I don't know, I won't ask. I will try to make sure I figure it out on my own. Okay? All right? Translation. Now, the behavior that proceeds from the translation is that I must pretend, deflect, or run away, figure it out on my own when I'm exposed. So if I know that I'm in a place where I don't know something, if I reach out my hand, I'm not going to reach it out, because I already know I've been taught through negative reinforcement that if I reach out, I will be what? Punished. And to avoid being punished, I won't reach out my hand, okay? So let me talk a little bit about negative reinforcement, and maybe some of you will be able to identify some of your past attributes or past events in your life where you've been negatively reinforced. What negative reinforcement is negative reinforcement strengthens a response or behavior by stopping, removing, or avoiding a negative outcome or an adverse stimulus, which is, I'll explain that in a second. So B.F. Skinner first described the term in his theory of operant conditioning. Rather than delivering a punishment, which is, so yes, that's it. An adverse stimulus is a punishment. So rather than delivering a punishment or a reward, which is positive reinforcement, Negative reinforcement works by taking away something the individual finds undesirable. So in that moment, my father may not have known, and many of our parents may not have known, okay, that what they were doing was removing an undesirable behavior. What they were seeing as you not concentrating, what them seeing as you not trying hard, what them seeing you as not being present, what them seeing you as trying to mess around or whatever, they saw it as an undesirable behavior. And in doing so, the beating or the shaming or the cussing or the, you saying some things to you, okay, all right, in that moment is all about them trying to remove, okay, a negative behavior they deem undesirable, okay? And this removal reinforces the behavior that precedes it, making it more likely that the response will take place. So I had an undesirable response, right? He may not have known fully what the undesirable response was. He wanted me to be on point and to think about what I was doing, but all he did was remove an undesirable response, which was me asking for help. So that then leads to a behavior. I will now pretend, I will deflect, I will run away, I will make up lies, I will be deceiving when I don't know something, rather than asking for help. Rather than me being vulnerable, and sharing my feelings or my thoughts or anything like that, I'm not going to do it. Because I already know that when I do that, I will be what? Punished. And when I realize I'm going to be punished, I want to avoid the adverse stimuli. I don't want to be punished. So what's going to happen is, so I don't get punished, I won't be vulnerable. Because the opening of the hand is about being vulnerable. Right? So now what I'm going to do from this point onwards is I'm going to now no longer share any part of me that leaves me exposed. Okay? You're not going to have me stripped naked, and I'm speaking that metaphorically and figuratively, and allow you to flog me that way again. I'm just not going to experience that again. And so what I will do from now onwards is I will make sure that I tool up and I armor up. This is very similar to why men don't ask for help, but why men don't become vulnerable. There's an extra component here. Okay, the extra component here is that when this happens at home, it often does happen outside too. Okay, all right, that when this happens at the home, this also happens outside too. And the outside programming is probably even stronger than the one you probably experience at home. But the first one that you experience is usually at home, right? You get confirmational bias, okay? So when you go out there, what happens is this. You are told, just like you were told maybe inadvertently, boys don't cry. Man up. Men don't do feelings. That's soft. You're being weak. Why are you crying? You're too emotional. Right? That will happen. That will be the consensus from outside when you're growing up. Then something else happens. This is problem number one. Okay? Problem number one. That's what happens. Problem number one is this. Okay? Is that the confirmational bias, when you get out there, you yourself become part of the problem. You yourself become part of the problem, right? And I'll address that in problem two, but let me stick with problem one. Problem one is this. Your discernment is off because your experience of having safe places to share your vulnerabilities has been skewed. And so, unfortunately, you often find yourself in familiar energies of other people who represent what your family did to you. You find that same people outside, right? And when you then go to share your vulnerabilities, they do the exact same thing, confirming the bias that you already have, which then tells you the world outside is cruel, just like it was cruel inside of my house. Therefore, I cannot share my thoughts and my feelings. There is no safe place at home, and there certainly isn't no safe place outside. And the moment I do share is the moment I die. I'm not going to do it. And in fact, there is positive reinforcement for being toxic in your masculinity. There is positive reinforcement for being angry, right? There is positive reinforcement that is coming from you showing negative stereotypes, or you covering up your vulnerability by deflecting or becoming quote unquote a bully, or by becoming I would say displacing your anger in another way, or using another channel to be able to showcase your frustration, i.e. sports. A lot of men go into sports to exert the frustrations, the anger, the emotions that they're feeling in sports, right? A lot of men will use sports as a way of, I can't remember the correct psychological term, transmuting the emotions that they have into sports, and then they get positive reward. For instance, in Americans, this, where you have some sports like American football, right? The harder you hit, the way you're praised for the hardness you're hit, the anger that you have and aggression you have is supported, is appreciated, right? For us in UK, we have sports like soccer, and we have some classic players who have been some angry players who have really lighted up people and shown some aggression on the pitch, and people love them because they love the gladiator, right? And so a lot of men have transmutated their frustration, their anger, the lack of ability to be able to share their thoughts and their feelings into sports, because it's one way that's allowed for positive reinforcement, but a positive way of also releasing how you feel. But here's problem number 2. Sports can't solve it all for most people. Sports doesn't solve it all for most people. Okay, and so what happens is there is a tank that a man usually has, and his frustration, his anger, his hurt, his pain, his fears, all this kind of stuff, it goes to the top of the tank. Now maybe he does sports, or maybe he goes into academics and does really, really well and gets some positive reinforcement. What that does, it takes a little bit of the edge off, so it drops a little bit, but the cup is still full. In fact, when the cup shakes, the water spills out a little bit, right? And unfortunately, it doesn't solve the issue, because he needs a place to be able to release how he feels. But he doesn't have that safe place. So he's not regulated. And you know how I feel about emotional regulation, which is express, that is understand and process. Okay? If you can't express yourself, you tend to use anger, or you tend to act out. If you can't process, you tend to be very confused, and you tend to shut down. When you when you can't process, you tend to shut down, and when you can't understand, you tend to be confused, right? So here's a big thing, right? A lot of men with a lack of emotional regulation, with their cup at the fullest brim, with sports and arts and education or whatever, their way of finding some level of, how do I call it, positive reinforcement, the cup is pretty full, but it takes a little bit of the edge off. But it takes one shaking for the water to spill out. And suddenly, that person explodes. It's where a lot of men are usually. Okay? This is where a lot of men are. And that can lead to, unfortunately, topping yourself off. That can lead to anger coming out of nowhere. That can lead to mental breakdowns. That can lead to men mistreating other people, having a lack of empathy, and etc., etc., right? So this leads to a whole bunch of issues, because you've got no space to be vulnerable. In fact, you don't know how to be vulnerable. You don't know how to be, okay? You don't know how to be vulnerable. So now what happens is, again, like I said, you get a confirmational bias and you go to the wrong place, and they shun you and they embarrass you. You go further down the rabbit hole of saying, I'm not going to share what I'm going through. Okay? Problem number 2 is this. You become part of the problem rather than the solution. You become part of the toxic masculinity oftentimes, right? Other men start showing their emotional self and you start ridiculing them. Look at the internet. You want proof of that? Go into the internet. Many of us understand Russell Wilson and Sierra. A lot of the manosphere specifically as well are in that space. They see Russell Wilson and make him a simp and they want to negatively reinforce issues because they themselves have not been able to, they've not been allowed to share themselves emotionally. So they see someone like Russell Wilson, and immediately they downplay him, they cuss him, they laugh at him, they ridicule him, they shame him, they are embarrassed by him, because what they want to do is say, this is the bad one, I'm the good one. I don't share my feelings like this. I'm not vulnerable like this. You can't catch me off guard like this. Now, you'll never have a woman doing this, because again, what women are to men are an exposure of our vulnerabilities. Right? When a woman gets close to you, she's able to expose you in a particular way that no other human being can. Right? Like a woman can expose you in a way that no other person can, or no other human beings can. So when a woman gets that close to you, in order to love her, you're going to have to be vulnerable. In order to embrace her, you're going to have to open your arms. In order to share your world, you're going to have to open yourself up. Right? So it requires vulnerability to do so. So when we look at someone like Russell Wilson, right, taking care of her and taking care of the kid, etc., that's not his, people get onto him. Now, he's just an example of what men will end up doing, or young boys will end up doing, when they see behavior that they have been shunned for in their youth. If you've been shunned in your household for sharing emotions, being able to express yourself emotively, all right, then what happens when you get outside in the real world? Well, you don't want to be the bottom of the totem pole. You don't want to be bottom of the popular hierarchy. You don't want to be laughed at outside too. No, so what you end up doing is becoming part of those people that shun, that embarrass, that torture, that will expose other men. You have a lack of empathy because you were lacked and not afforded empathy too. Right? I love that. Mr. Bonplay said, I used to fight. Right? That was it. And a lot of boys, I remember back in my school, a lot of boys did fight because it's a show of strength. Because remember, being vulnerable is a weakness. So anytime you try to show me up, anytime you try to shame or embarrass me, I'm going to be related back to when I was a young kid. It ain't never going to happen. You're never going to punk me. Fighting usually occurs next. Right? As a way of showing of strength. You thought I was weak? I'll show you. Problem number 3, why men are not vulnerable. What happens? We suffer in silence, okay? And we have to suffer in silence according to what we've learned, because when we do offer our hand, it's slapped away, right? When we do offer our hand, it's slapped away. So we learn to suffer in silence. The problem with suffering in silence is when problems like that come on you, there's nowhere to release the tension. And because there's nowhere to release the tension, you're overwhelmed. There's nowhere to release the tension, you are now overwhelmed. It becomes too much. It becomes heavy. Right? And so you suffering in that silence cripples a lot of men. That's why some men will not share when they go bankrupt, not share when when their finances is all out of sync. Okay, when suffer in silence because they won't share that they're in pain or they're sick. Even like things like sickness, men don't even take sickness properly because we sound like we're whining, right? And women too buy into it a little bit because we've taught them that, right? Right, we say man flu. And it's like, when a man has flu, he does the most. You can't even be sick. You be sick, we're going to ridicule you. Look at you, all sick and curled up on the sofa with the duvet over you. That's that little bee. Right? We won't go to the doctors because, again, it's a sign of weakness. Where's your stoicism? Where's your strength? Come on, boy. Men don't get sick. Men don't get depressed. We had a whole live yesterday about this. Men don't get depressed. They can't. You can't afford to be depressed. Well, guess what? You're going to break down. Or you're going to deflect. Or you're going to lie. Or you're going to deceive and find a way to deflect from that pain that you're actually feeling. Right? So yes, what Mr. Play says, suffering in silence led me to seeking out fights to take the edge off. That edge is what I'm talking about. Right? That most men are on the edge. Most men are on the freaking edge. And if you're a man listening to this, I want you to hear this. I can understand. And if you're a man listening to this, part of what I'm saying, you're probably even cussing me out saying I'm soft or I'm a simp, and I get it. I understand. I'm not gonna challenge you on that. What I want you to understand is that don't take away the pain though. That don't take away what you're feeling though. That don't take away the fact that you know and I know that you're suffering where you are. Right? It hurts. And I know when I say it hurts, it sounds soft. I understand. But take your time with it, bro. We're here to support you. You feel what I'm saying to you? Yeah? Problem number 2. Okay? Problem number 4, is having bottled up emotions can lead to irrational behavior. Okay? Having bottled up emotions can lead to irrational behavior. Many people, and especially men too, can have irrational responses to situations. And they have those irrational responses because they're not regulated. And then they'll tell you, I don't have them. You know what? I don't do emotions. You're lying. Anger is an emotion. Many of you can't identify what actual emotions are. So therefore you tell me, I'm not emotional. Anger is an emotion. When you act irrationally, it is an emotion. If you act out of fear, you may cover it up with something else, but it's an emotion. When you react, and oftentimes anger becomes the forthright emotion that most men use, because anger is seen as strong. It's seen as masculine. It's seen as destructive. It's seen as powerful. Because it sends a message to everybody else. If you wanna, with me, you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that, okay? So anger becomes usually the forthright emotion that a lot of men will use, okay, as a way of being able to cover up what they really feel, which is a vulnerability, pain, hurt, disappointment, frustration. There's only a few. In fact, next time we'll do an emotional wheel. We'll get an emotional wheel. We'll talk about emotions, right? And we'll do an emotional wheel. But it's to cover up those feelings. Sometimes, too, some men are not able to even identify these emotions. And this is women too, but I'm talking about specifically men today. Some men can't even identify these emotions because they don't know what these emotions actually are. They feel but have no descriptors to describe what they're feeling. Going back to emotional regulation, I don't understand. So guess what's going to happen? When I don't understand, I'm going to go to my safety and my comfort. I'm going to retreat to where I know I feel covered up and armored up and I feel safe. Anger. Because in any language and in any particular culture, for some reason, anger is one of those emotions that is really easy to understand. Like you don't need the words for it. You just know you're angry. And we can all recognize it really easy too. Right? So what happens is a lot of men retreat to that place. Okay? Because it's a space of comfort. All right? It's a space of comfort. So I want to leave it at that point. All right? And for any man out there, like I said, tune into the series. I'm going to be doing, hopefully I can do it every single day for 5 days in a week. I won't do it on weekends. I'll just do it Monday to Friday. Where we're just addressing real issues, right? I totally understand that as a man, you're not afforded the certain space and place to be able to share how you feel. I've built a platform where both men and women can have a safe space to share their thoughts and their feelings. So if you're watching this video, it's not by chance. If you're watching this video, it is not by just by any kind of circumstance. The Lord has brought you to this place, right? And I'm doing a whole series of videos on this so that you can begin to open up. And in the very beginning, what I told you was a story. I told you a story about the point of origin of my pain. It's childhood. Right? A really simple situation. dad beating me because I wasn't getting the answers right. He doesn't see it that way, but I am processing it that way. And therefore, what you see and what you experience is as a result of those particular incidents. All right? So our half an hour is up. So I'm going to like it. I want you guys to like it, share, and subscribe. And I really want you ladies, especially in the chat, to help me share this with your sons, your uncles, your brothers, your cousins, your nephews, your dads, your granddads. Share this kind of video with them because they need to see this kind of video, because a lot of times we don't have the space. And as much as we say there are spaces like this, we often aren't aware there are spaces like this, right? So tomorrow, what we're going to be discussing is part 4, and we'll be discussing anxiety. You know, anxiety, and I don't really suffer with anxiety, but at points in time I do feel the anxiety. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that as well. So, and then Friday is speaking to your younger self as well. Okay, all right. So if you're a man out there, I want you to understand this is a safe space. You can come, you can comment, you can message me if you need to, email me, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and let's start having more of these conversations, right? Because I know that as men, we don't oftentimes get the space to do so, but I want to provide that space for you. It's not every day, okay, that we have to downplay men or put them aside. We're gonna help by creating a space for you guys to come and talk. Mr. Play says, once I became comfortable to open myself, it helped me be vulnerable with women. While I'm still wary of who I do it with, I let go, and I let go when I get stuff off my chest. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Don't Play as well. And Mr. Don't Play, you've been here for a little while as well, and I appreciate, you know, you've been part of this team for a long while, so it's good to see other men being able to function in this space as well. And we want to bring more into this space as well, to be able to heal and to grow and to develop as well. So guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe, wherever you're watching this on Insta, Twitter, whether you're watching it on YouTube. Make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on the bell button for notification uploads. We appreciate y'all. Stay locked, stay loaded. We'll see you again very, very soon.